Is up, everybody? Mr. Purse here. Welcome to topic 1.2, developments in Dar al-Islam. If you've never heard the term Dar al-Islam before, it generally just refers to the spread of Islam and how governments adapt or syncretize, which we'll get into later, and blend Islam with local beliefs and cultures. And Dar al-Islam really is that connection that people have from these different regions with one another because the basis of their government or cultural beliefs is Islam. And this is really, we're going to look at this again, circa 1200 to 1450. Circa means around or about. And one friendly reminder before we get into this, please, I will not say this every time, but take some notes on this. Write it down however you want. Take the notes however and whatever is best for you. Draw pictures, write words, write extra things on the side. Write down what you see, write down what you hear. You'll thank me later, I promise. With that said, Islam is going to start in a region referred to as the Middle East. Last Ed puzzle, we talked about East Asia, which was three regions or three modern countries. Four modern countries. China, North and South Korea, Japan. This is the Middle East. It's really kind of a Eurocentric term, meaning it is refers back to really like a European focused time. Europeans referred to the Middle East as the Middle East because it was the middle part between China and Europe. And in here we see the Middle East, modern countries. We're talking about Iran, Iraq. This is the Arabian Peninsula. We have the modern country of Israel here, Syria, Jordan. So this area is referred to as the Middle East. Islam is going to be founded, just a quick review from Global 1 or AP9. Islam is going to be founded by Muhammad. It's really founded around 622, give or take, and Muhammad receives a message, multiple messages, from the angel Gabriel while he is kind of meditating up in the mountains. He comes back down, he tells people, hey, eventually, although he's a little embarrassed at first, but he eventually comes back and tells people what the angel Gabriel said. And it's believed amongst Muslims that Muhammad is the last and final prophet that God or Allah will ever send to earth. And Islam, so real quick before we get into these next couple slides, as we go through this first unit, you're going to notice that there's a theme here of cultural influence, government, and technological innovations through most of these places. So as you see this, kind of think in the back of your mind, how is this similar or different to what we talked about in East Asia? So first is, I do want to point out that Islam is rooted in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Judeo just means Jewish, Christian tradition. All three of them have the same prophets for the most part, although Christians and Jewish people don't believe Muhammad was a prophet, but Muslims believe that the past prophets in Judaism, as well as Jesus, was a prophet in Islamic tradition. They share similar stories. For example, Noah's Ark, David slaying Goliath are similar stories in all three. And they're all from the same region. They're all from this area of the Middle East. Abraham was from this area here. Moses from this area here. The historical person, Jesus, from this area here. Muhammad, a little bit down here, but still in that general region. And merchants who were Jewish and Christian would travel down into this city down here, which is where Muhammad is from, called Mecca, because it was a trade center and they would trade goods with these people. So the people in this region of Saudi Arabia, although there's a huge desert here, were knowledgeable of these Judeo-Christian traditions. And all three of these, this is the Jewish Star of David, obviously the cross and the crescent and moon, which symbolize these three religions. In Islam, again, this is should be just a review for you. There is the 5 pillars of faith. The number one is that Allah is the one and only God and Muhammad is his last prophet. And there are 4 other pillars that go with it, including taking a Hajj or pilgrimage to Mecca if you are financially and physically capable to go visit where Muhammad is from. Their holy book is the Quran. Again, the Quran a lot of it is based off of Judeo-Christian traditions. And again, just this belief that Muhammad is the last prophet, that there's a long line of prophets in Islamic tradition, going from Abraham and Moses, etc., including Jesus, and then Muhammad being the last and final prophet, and that there will be no more prophets after Muhammad. With this, in terms of the government, there's a caliphate. So caliph or caliph refers to king in Arabic. And there had been a caliphate known as the Abbasid Caliphate, which had really been very dominant and strong from the 800s and 900s through about the 1200s. And they really start declining around circa there's that word again, 1200. And there's this huge, what is referred to as kind of political fragmentation. Great word here, fragmentation. To fragment is to split up. So if you don't know this, you can underline this and put like in parentheses like split up or whatever you want to do. But political fragmentation. So when the Abbasid, who were very strong and powerful and had their capital right here in modern day Iraq called Baghdad, they split up and this region starts fragmented. A new group of people from Central Asia roll down in here and kind of overthrow the Abbasid Caliphate, and they're called the Seljuks, and they really come in from, again, this area of Central Asia, and you can see kind of these arrows of this area that they take over. And they're going to take over a lot of this yellow region. Another group takes over this green region. We got the Byzantine Empire, who has still been existing since like the 300s, but they're kind of on the decline existing here. So this political fragmentation leads to this. Most of these regions are going to have a emperor, also known as the Caliph, who is going to be in charge of these regions, very centralized or attempt at centralizing the government. In terms of how they expand, so Islam really expands through a couple different things, both before 1200 and during this period. One is military force. They are generally had been historically nomadic people who were good on horses, and they had access because there was a lot of merchant activity. They had access to products, especially solid sword making, saddles, things that can help you go out and conquer other places. So one way they expand is through military force. They're also going to expand through merchant activity. Muhammad was a merchant, and because he was a merchant activity is seen as being an important profession, as opposed to in China, where merchants were viewed as low because they weren't actually making things themselves or developing things themselves. In Islamic culture, merchants are seen as a very important position, and they're high on the social class. So it encourages people to become merchants and to go out and trade with other people. So we see a lot of if I'm a merchant and I trade with someone who's not Muslim, I might explain what Islam is, and then they might think that's better, and they might convert either because they can get a better deal with me if they're Muslim, or they might just truly believe in what I'm preaching and what I'm saying, and we're going to see a lot of conversion through that. The third is this group of people called Sufi missionaries. Sufi it's not really a branch of Islam, but people who practice Islam kind of are Sufis, and Sufi is basically a way. People who are Sufis believe in blending Islam with local cultural beliefs. So they really kind of integrate local ideas, local gods, local types of prayers and songs and whatnot with Islam. It can be a Sunni or Shia. If you don't know the difference between a Sunni and a Shia, Sunnis, there was a split early on in Islam in which Sunnis believe that that the rulers after Muhammad should be people elected by a local council, essentially. And people who are Shia believe that Muhammad's descendants should be the next in line to rule. So that's kind of two separate things. But Sufis can be Sunni or Shia. It's not like a separate branch. They really believe in abstaining from earthly pleasures, and they do these like crazy whirly dances. They're really like, they would draw your attention if they came into your town. They're kind of mystical. People thought they had like magical powers almost, and people are just kind of drawn to the spectacle of them. In class, I'll make sure I show you a video of the whirling dances, because how can you not want to see a Sufi whirly dance? But these people are going to go out and spread Islam because they're merchants, and they're considered missionaries spreading ideas. So we're going to see Islam spread through the whirly-twirly Sufi missionaries, which is always cool. So I just want to point those guys out. And just a quick little side note, this is the modern Muslim population in the world. You will notice that anything that's in this dark green is about 90 to 100% of that local population is Muslim today. So you can see it's really centered in the Middle East, and this is where the Abbasid Caliphate is. You're also going to see that it's really spread along trade routes, and as we get into Unit 2, Islam is going to spread all along all the different trade routes because of the merchant activity. So you're going to see a lot of Islamic conversion and a lot of people who practice Islam today down here along the coast. This is the Indian Ocean trade route, and also along what we'll eventually talk about, which is the sub-Saharan trade route of gold salt. So I just want to point this out because, one, I think it's just kind of interesting, but also this is where Islam spreads. Last but not least, there's a lot of innovation amongst the people who practice Islam and are in the Islamic Empire. Although the original Arabic people who practiced Islam generally were nomadic, they didn't have their own written language. As Islam spreads and this written language really takes off and expands, Islam is going to take a lot of ideas. They're very open to other ideas. They're not going into places that they conquer and just like burning stuff down. They're really interested in, which was common at the time. They're really interested in taking other people's ideas, bringing it back to the Middle East, putting these ideas together from Europe, from India, from China, and trying to blend these ideas together to further advancements. There's a lot of new intellectual innovations in the Muslim Empire. A ton of mathematical advances. If you don't like algebra, thank the Muslim Empire. We have what are called Arabic numerals, which are the basis of our numerals today. Quadratic equations, trigonometry, some geometry advances based on things that happened in the Greek and Roman Empire ideas. We also have huge scientific advances, surgical centers and hospitals, pharmacology, like blending of different herbal medicines together to help heal people, physics. One kind of cool story is they needed to figure out in Baghdad where to build a new hospital. They didn't know where to build it, and hospitals weren't very common in most empires at the time. So essentially they wanted the cleanest place that had the least amount of bacteria. So they put out pieces of essentially raw meat all around the city, and they wanted to see whichever one rotted last. They figured that would be the least dirty place and the best place to build their hospital. So kind of cool. Also, we're going to see a lot of transfer of ideas in the Muslim Empire. Not only are they creating ideas, but then they're transferring ideas. Like I said, we're going to take things from India and Greece. We're going to combine those practices, and then we're going to send those ideas back out again. So we have this huge transfer of ideas. They actually have a house which doesn't exist anymore, which was referred to as the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. Some people debate if this even existed, but this is a picture of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. It was really the biggest school and library, one of the biggest libraries in the world at the time. Huge medical advances, scientific advances. I don't want to poo-poo on the Mongols too much, but when they come in 1258, supposedly they burned the whole thing down, which lost a whole lot of knowledge. Who knows where we would have been now? Flying cars probably. But that's what I got. A lot of stuff. We'll kind of sort through some of this stuff in class. As always, questions, comments, please let me know. Write it down. That's all I got. I'm out.